I've worked all fast today. Or this experience with technology that is kind of somewhat challenging for me, but anyway, we figured it out. We're live, and today I thought we're having a bit of a theme or topic, and that is loneliness. But whatever question arises for you, please just type it in, and happy to have that conversation. We'll touch on other topics as well. But I think loneliness becomes even more of an issue now at this time of the year, where there's a lot of family activities, family get-togethers, and for a lot of people, it feels like they don't have that. They don't have those close family things. There's rupture there, right? So it comes up a lot for people, and I really want to address it, not to normalize it, but for people to realize that loneliness is perhaps something that most, if not all, people experience at some point in their life. But what I find is that for people with childhood trauma, developmental trauma, where there was a lot of disruption in childhood, a lot of trauma and abuse, that sense of loneliness is somewhat more pervasive, more persistent, more heavy, right? It's like a theme that is just there all the time almost, right? Perhaps you can relate with that. Like there were times where I was actually with people that I did deeply care about, and I enjoyed their company. Like they were nurturing, supportive people, friends, and yet I was sitting there feeling lonely. Right? Perhaps you had that experience too. Unique one says, yeah, it consumes you. Exactly, it consumes you, and most of the time, it also comes with a sense of emptiness for me as well. It's kind of weird. That might not be for everyone. We all have our kind of unique flavors of how we experience that, and to learn that that's not right or wrong to this. It's an experience, right? And it's a very uncomfortable one. It feels wrong. I thought for so long that makes me really wrong, and it's so understandable looking back. Like if you're not looking at your own childhood, if you're looking at someone else's childhood who might have had some really maybe very similar experience to you, right? It's easier to see how much sense it makes for that person to feel alone, right? Because in childhood there was this deep sense of separation as well, right? We realized something's not right. We might not have been able to put this in words because we didn't have anything to compare it with, right? Often, for a lot of people, they went through horrific abuse and had no idea till adulthood that was actually abusive. That's not what's happening in everyone's home, right? Or for some people, it wasn't at home. It was in boarding schools or outside of school or whatever, wherever it was, right? Sometimes we didn't realize that. And we try to make sense of it in all sorts of different ways. And a lot of the time we have to pull back inwardly to protect ourselves. We put a guard up. We know we can no longer communicate our true emotions, how we feel about something, or what we like or dislikes, our preferences. If they're constantly unmet, if our needs aren't met, right, constantly, we realize that, okay, I am not cared for. People don't see me. People don't listen to me, or people completely disregard my wishes. They just go over the top of things. That there has to be some mechanism for us to protect ourselves, right? To save ourselves. Okay. I mean, the talking about it, I just realized the thing. Caroline says, "Hi Tanya. For me, it comes with the abandonment issues." Oh yes, that's a big one. Iconic Hearts, hi. Nick ones still feel this way. Yes. So let's really look at this. Why this is still there, right? This really, it's a very familiar pattern now that we have. It's so ingrained, that sense. For a while, it almost felt like there's those bubbles things that you can buy, especially with a snowman in it, and then you shake it. shake the snowman and it's like the snowflakes fall down again. What do you call those? I don't know what, snowflake globes or whatever. I always had the sense that I am like that snowman in that globe, and I'm somehow separate from all the people outside of me. I had that real sense of I don't belong here. I don't fit in. I don't get what's going on. There's something, I just can't make sense of it. Has anyone else had that experience, right? And when we're pulling ourselves back like this, becomes really difficult to connect with other people and get that sense of belonging. So I thought in one way that the bigger that sense of separation is, the bigger the sense of loneliness is as well. For me too, chronic loneliness, yes, it feels very chronic. Yeah. And one thing, like when I said at the beginning that most people, when you talk to them, would have had a sense of loneliness, right? Sometimes it's good to talk about it, and I really want to address what's different for people who had a lot of trauma and abuse as well. But sometimes when we're having that deep sense, to just open up to someone that is a reasonably good friend, right? And just really ask them honestly, have you ever had that sense, even though you're with people that you love, that you are that loneliness is there? And you'll find that most people say yes, right? They had it. Maybe they had just glimpses or very brief periods, right, where things didn't go right for them. But it was there, right? So people can relate to that sense in some way. Perhaps not to that chronicness or that intensity that we have, but there's the ability to relate with them. But what I find so this is from my own experience, that loneliness is so much stronger, because in order for me to keep surviving in childhood, not only did I see myself separate to other people, but as we grow up into adults, there's all these parts of us that we don't like and that are confusing, that we're trying to hide, right? So I had this very rapturous relationship within myself, and for a long time that my younger self, right, whether you want to call it your younger self or your inner child or your parts, I hated them, absolutely hated them, and I wanted to be separate from them. And so in a sense, that intense loneliness is from the inner child. It's sitting there, it's pulling me down. It keeps, every time I'm thinking or feeling that, it's the intensity is hers, while I fuel it in a sense by hating on my inner child. Does that make sense? Like I push her away even more, so she feels even more alone and feels like, almost like, oh yes, it's like all the childhood stuff is kind of confirmed in that way, if that makes sense. So I keep it going internally for myself, even when I'm alone, or I used to, and I also see it in other people, and we do that by often misreading cues, right? We really want to pay attention. I said Steve Porteous, if you're familiar with his work, he does he's written a lot of books and done a lot of research on the polyvagal theory. And he really highlights that when he had a lot of trauma in childhood, that you misread facial cues, right? Someone not really looking at you when you enter the room, when they're saying hello, that this dismissiveness, right? We could interpret it as dismissive. Oh, they don't want me to be here. I don't fit in here. She probably thinks that I shouldn't. She wishes I didn't come, right? That's our inner dialogue. Well, she may have just not had any sleep all night, right? And it's just really exhausted and tired, and has nothing to do with us, right? So that there is a lot of things that play into this. I just really wanted you to appreciate, or appreciate is probably the wrong word, acknowledge the complexity of this, that this comes from so many different angles, that deep sense of loneliness. Carolyn says, makes perfect sense to me, thank you. It is said, I fuel it by having the everybody hates me syndrome. Yes, yeah. And to recognize that, and I love the way you said it, that it's like naming that theme. So we can recognize that when that happens for me, or here is that everybody hates me theme. Or for me, often was here, I'm not good enough. I don't fit in. I'm a burden to society, right? Whatever theme it is for you. Okay, oh, here it is. My mind telling me that story again, to really point it out and shine a light on it. Okay, where I can then make a decision in this moment. Okay, me going into that story, getting really entangled and believing and adding onto that story, is this helping me to feel more connected to people, or is it actually pulling me away even further, right? Because hating on myself, in my case, it always was, I knew I was fueling it in a way, and in the same way, I for a long time I felt like I couldn't stop it, right? I said, but this is just me. This is me. This is how I am. This is who I am. This is how I've always been, right? Have you ever told yourself things like that, right? So this is so familiar and helpful. Thank you. Yes. Addicted to the abandonment. Yes. Right. This is so familiar to us, that those feelings, right? And I like the way Dr. Joe Dispenza always talks about it, really highlights that this isn't just sensations and stories. With the sensations and stories, there is like there's whole neuronal pathways to this that kind of dictate what kind of chemicals are released in your body to keep recreating that same familiar feeling, the same familiar perception and situation for you, right? It's a habit, and it's, you don't have to think about it. It just automatically happens. It's so deeply ingrained. For us to shift out of this will feel very unfamiliar. It will feel wrong, and it will feel uncomfortable, and there's a lot of resistance there, right? And when we know that this happens, it can help, because at the beginning, every time I bumped into something feeling wrong or unfamiliar, I thought I'm doing the healing wrong. This is not right. I always thought I needed to feel good, right? That if I'm doing it right, I should be feeling good. I should be feeling better. I should be having happiness and joy and love and that kind of stuff. And it wasn't. It felt wrong. And I really want you to recognize this, because this is such a deeply ingrained pattern that at the beginning, when you're shifting out of this, it feels wrong, right? It's the same like when that example about brushing your teeth, right? If you, for once, just try brushing your teeth with the non-dominant hand, how wrong and awkward that feels, right? And it, like when I had my broken collarbone, I had no choice. I had to use my other hand, and it took so long for this to actually feel reasonably okay. And it is a similar, very similar, that uncomfortableness feeling for our that changing of our perception of ourselves, of who we are. It's almost an identity shift that needs to come with that sense of loneliness, right? We can't just work on trying to get rid of loneliness, and all of a sudden I want to feel that I'm belonging and that I am loved and appreciated and I fit in, and it sounds nice. In my daydreams, I can create that. I was always a daydreamer, and I know that this is part of what helped me survive childhood, right? Because going into those daydreams where everything is just beautiful, and it was really like a fairyland, right? Maybe some of you had a similar strategies to escape that really deep sense. There's something so fundamentally wrong with me. I can't figure this out. Yeah, it's so that hopelessness and helplessness, right? I just can't figure it out. I don't know what it is, right? And it's bad stuff just keeps happening. And I'm trying to be a good girl. I'm trying so hard, right? And it just isn't happening. So that escape into this dream world where everything is just magic, and it was an escape, right? And to acknowledge that. But I also know the more I use this, right? This is a tool that I still have in my toolbox. I know I can go into my daydream world at any point in time, but I know if I do go in there, that sense of separateness is created. It is getting bigger again. It puts more texture to it. I don't know, but like a texture is probably not the right word either. But it feels bigger again, right? It intensifies that separation and that sense that I don't belong here and I'm separate from other people. Can you see that? So it's an okay tool to use, but also know, oh, coming back to the here and now. Yes. So can I say, me too. I still love my fantasy world, but can't escape with, yes, you're saying it now. It can be a tool, right? All those coping mechanisms that we learned, including isolating ourselves, right? Cutting ourselves off, they were coping mechanisms. They're tools in our toolbox we can go back to, right? But to realize that now in my adult body, I know I want to explore some different tools. And I know this is going to feel really uncomfortable, me learning this, me shifting into this, but I am going to stick with that, right? And when we're sticking with this, like it needs to be at least 3 weeks on a consistent basis before our neuronal pathways actually start shifting or there's a change noticeable, right? And it takes 90 days to actually really ingrain a new habit, a new way of doing things, a new way of thinking about yourself, and all of that. So we need to give ourselves a little bit of time. Just because I tried something for a week and I'm still feeling really that heaviness of that loneliness, to realize, oh, okay, my neuronal pathway is only just starting to fire slightly different. So I'm not noticing the changes just yet, right? To give yourself some time there, just in case you're as impatient as I was, because I wanted it to happen now, and now. I was so impatient. Carolyn said, I use a lot of distractions now, and when that inner bad dialogue starts again, I try using positive self-talk. Doesn't always work, but I keep trying. Yes. And I think yeah, that's for myself, right? When I still was hating on myself so much, and I had this really quite self-destructive self-talk, when I went into like trying to switch this into something positive, what happened for me is I was so caught up in my mental world that I still didn't feel any more connected to the here and now, because I was so caught up in my mind. Can you see that? Does that make sense? Now I try, like when I catch that theme, when I that dialogue, or like iconic art said that, what was yours? No, everybody hates me syndrome, right? I'm not good enough. I'm a burden to society. People don't want me here. I don't belong. Right? When I recognize that theme, it's, oh, here it is. But it is like a cloud moving past, right? I don't engage in it, or for people like cars driving past, right? That not getting not giving it the attention that it wants. The moment we're getting involved and we're giving it attention, the emotions are coming up, and it's the emotions that making the thoughts sticky. And then there's another thought, and the emotions intensify and intensify. But if we're like, oh, this story again, this is old. Like I remember that point in therapy. So I'm actually so sick and tired of the same thing. I would never watch a movie that many times as the same story, as my mind keeps replaying the same kind of story. Has anyone ever experienced that? I'm so bored with this, right? And I use that when the stories come, oh, here's that I'm not good enough story again. I'm done with that. Boring. Give me something new, something more, something different. It's just like, it can be tiring, and sometimes I think when we're taking it more lightly, more playful, and we're having a laugh at our mind in a bit, to realize that the thoughts, we're not responsible for our thoughts. I really want you to get that. You are not responsible for the thoughts that come up in your mind. right? Even if you just pause now and listen in, whatever thought that comes up in your mind right now, where does it come from? Is there a specific location where you go in and it generate it? It doesn't. It just pops up, right? It just arises and then it fades out again, and a new one comes, and it just comes. You're not responsible for them. They just come and they come. What we're trying to learn is to not get pulled into, sucked in, just like on TV, right? Watching one series after another, we kind of get sucked into this, right? That's what the stories are doing. The thoughts are doing. They're trying to get us involved in that. It's like, hey, hang on. There's a whole world out there, right? I want to go on and explore the trees and watch the butterflies and birds, right? Instead of getting sucked into that story, right? It's a bit like that. Does that make sense? The series. So we don't want to try and get involved in trying to change the story, turn the thoughts that are quite negative and heavy into positive ones. It's just like, oh, no, that's not a helpful one. And focusing back into my body, where can I feel my body? Can I feel the ground under my feet, right? Really get, oh yeah, here it is, the sense, right? It's actually, the floor is quite cool. It's a little bit of a chilly breeze going through the room. I can feel the breeze on my skin, right? And I can hear the birds chirping, like really coming back into all the other senses. During the time where I felt the most lonely, when my PTSD was most flared up, I didn't see any of that. I was so caught up in my mind, thinking about the stories, giving myself a hard time for ruminating, because I shouldn't be ruminating, I shouldn't be catastrophizing, because that's all wrong, right? This is whatever therapists call that maladaptive thinking or distorted thinking and all this kind of stuff, right? That some of the psychology is actually almost hurtful, because it makes you feel more broken. Do you see that? By labeling certain things like faulty thinking patterns. I mean, that phrase, I think, is from cognitive behavioral therapy. It makes you feel more defective. Well, the thought is not, it's out of your power. The thoughts just arise. You didn't create that. You're not responsible for them. They just come up, right? So whenever you hear that, just scratch it outside. Oh, yeah. Let them think. So we got to be very picky, but any approach that you try, pick the things that resonate with you and you feel like, oh, this might help me. I always like to call them towards moves or away moves. This moves me towards the life that I want to live, the experience that I want to have, or it's going to move me away from that, right? Carolyn said that's a huge part of what I was struggling with. It's exhausting. Yeah, anything will trigger those thoughts, and then I go on and on, isn't it? It just gives it the thought after thought. It's like a train. I remember someone explaining it once as almost like you're on the train station and the train comes past, right, with that particular theme, I'm not good enough. And once you're hopping onto that, it's just one thought after another. You're on that journey. So it's almost like the key: do not hop on the train. I see, oh, here's the train. It's like, no, bye. Literally wave it. Like, get your body involved in that. It's more fun. It's more real than it's like, oh no, I am done with that story. Not having this today. Not having this. I love this vision. Like doomed to watch the boring movie day and night. Makes me laugh. Yes. Ruminating and brooding is such a trainer. Yes, it is. And I'm so glad you're aware of that, right? When we're getting really involved in all those mental thoughts and constructs and stories, right, that ruminate, it saps everything, all the energy. It's so draining. Carolyn, exactly. Years of therapy, and you have been so much more helpful in this one session. Oh, thank you. Yes, yeah. It's interesting. there were periods where I had all this really intense emotion towards therapy, right? It's like, this is right and this is wrong and this isn't how it should be, and they should be more therapy should be more informed, and this is more hurtful than harmful, right, than helpful. And I had so strong opinions about this. And now looking back, it's like it's all good. Everything had its place. Everything was it. I couldn't see it in the moment. I really couldn't. Right? There was a lot of things I thought, oh my gosh, that was such a waste of time. It was such a waste of money, such a waste of my effort and energy, right? And all this is thus, I just jumped on that train, right? What a waste of time. I'm getting everything wrong. I'm such a failure. Right? That's exactly what I did. But once we catch, I'm on that thought train again. There's just thought after thought. I keep coming back into my body, checking, what can I feel right now, right? Okay, I actually have some goosebumps right now. Right, to really be in tune. And I think, oh, my cat is just lying down here. He's sleeping. I can hear him snoring, right? And just reconnecting. Oh, there's all these things going on. And here is the thought that I am lonely. I'm the loneliest person on this planet. No one ever is going to feel as lonely as I did, right? I seriously thought that for a while. There's no way anyone could feel that lonely. and again, to realize, oh, their thoughts. Is me getting all involved in that thought, hopping onto this movie, right? Becoming the main character of that movie. Is this going to help me in this moment to feel more like I want to feel, right? For me, it was always joy. This was one of my value words that for a long time I always had 3 value words that I used as a compass to guide me on how experiences I want to have more of, and that was joyous was always one, right? And because I always felt like I missed out on so much joy. So that was a real theme for me. So when these thoughts are coming out, if I jump on this thought train, am I likely to have more joy or less joy? Right? To really check in. And I say that this is a choice. And sometimes people get triggered by that. This isn't a once-off choice. We really want you to hear it. It's not a once-off choice. I make this choice in this moment. 30 seconds later, I might have to make the very same choice again because similar thoughts are coming up. And again and again and again, I have to do this. Because remember, this is a very deeply ingrained pattern that helped us survive childhood. It had a very good function. It helped us survive. And it is still there to protect us. Right? We can almost, in a way, be thankful or grateful, right? Sometimes I say, oh, thanks, mind. But I got this now, right? I don't need to feel protected. I don't need to guard myself from other people. Because when I go into a room with friends, that people that I do actually care for, people who can be nurturing and empathetic, right? That most of the time, everyone has off days, right? To acknowledge that too. Just because someone has an off day doesn't make them a toxic person as such, because sometimes we can be very touchy depending on how we feel, right? When our PTSD is very flared up, to realize no, that person just had an off day. But when I'm in there and I don't feel I belong and I'm very disconnected, I know I have my full guard up in that moment, right? I am worried that if they see who I truly am, then they would reject me, then they would abandon me, then they would never ever want anything to do with me again. If they would know what's going on in my head, all this kind of stuff. If I am on this thought train where I'm thinking that if they would know what's going on, then, or if they would find out who I truly am, then they would reject me. And then I'm having this big wall up going in there. And it's impossible to feel connected. It's impossible to have, that sense of belonging. Right? Does that make sense? Thank you. So that is it due to lack of loving oneself? Is that the guarding? When we're protecting ourselves? Sometimes even the not loving ourselves, right? that putting it just towards ourselves can be extremely confronting because it's so unfamiliar to us, right? If you've never been supported and nurtured growing up when you were feeling wrong emotions, negative emotions, the way society tries to call it, right? I feel that there is no such thing, right? Any emotions are there for a reason. And sometimes when we walk into certain rooms and there is some anxiety, it is because we can pick up who there is a person in there who is feeling a lot of anger right now, and it's a valid kind of emotion to have coming up in that moment. But I think we want to be very careful with that loving oneself, because that, again, it can backfire, right? And so many therapy approaches and so many therapists really focus on that. You got to love yourself, you got to love yourself first before you can love others. And there is truth to that, right? I always say, like, we've got to fill our cup first, right? You got to nourish, you got to fill your cup, and then you give from the overflow. Otherwise you're constantly drained, right? If you're a people pleaser, you constantly go out and help others and give of your energy to others, and then there's nothing left for yourself, right? And in a way that is self-love, to have some boundaries there, to realize when someone asks you something and there is, you have that almost like a tensing up when they ask you to do something, to realize that's a no, right? That is self-love. I know it feels like I have to say yes in order to get some. We're doing all these things to be more likely accepted and respected and to feel safe, right? In that way, to fit in. We give of ourselves. Like this, it's not free giving. Like I said before, if we just give from the overflow, there's no strings attached to it. I don't need anything back from the other person. Then it flows freely. It's not training. It comes and it goes. It comes. It cycles. But when there's something, the underlying theme, and for most of the time, it's not even really conscious. We're not really aware of. We're doing this because we're trying to protect ourselves. I'm saying yes to all these things to be liked. So it's less likely that someone's going to get angry with me and reject me and abandon me and don't want me around. Right? I want you to really understand this, because that can really, it never helps you to feel more connected or less lonely. It actually amplifies that, right? Because you're constantly doing things that are not in alignment with you. They're incongruent. And then when you're by yourself, it's like, oh, you're beating up on yourself. Oh, I wish I didn't do that. I'm feeling so tired. I don't want to do that, and so forth, right? Icons out. And if you think no one can love you, I'm not putting myself first. Yeah. Yes, thank you. Yeah. And it may feel selfish at times, putting yourself first. But at the same time, I know when my cup is full, I can give so much more, right? It's never ending then. So it might be a short period where it feels like it's a bit out of balance and it's more towards me. But when we explain that to friends, it's like I'm really trying to heal myself, right? The way I think about myself, the way I feel. I want to help my body to heal, like physical, emotional, spiritual, all of it, right? So I'm going a bit inward. It might feel like I'm a little bit selfish, but please know you're in thought. I'll still love you, right? And to really let them know that this is what you're doing, right? To your good friends, right? The ones that you feel like might feel that you spent rejected, or I don't know whether rejected is the right word, like you don't make an effort anymore or things like that. So they know it's not, you're not making an effort, you're just really putting your energy inward for a little bit to heal that, right? And perhaps this gives them permission to do that for themselves too, right? So many people here have wounds and things that they just don't take the time to address, right? It feels so big. Oh, here is this thing that I still haven't dealt with, but let me drive my kids to this and that, and then I have to volunteer for this event and there, and then work wants me to stay back, right? But there's never time to address this because you're so focused on the outer world and helping everyone else, right? And I think this is what Gabo Mate in the book When the Body Says No, when we keep doing that, eventually there's some real physiological health issues that really force us to stop. Right, literally. I know some of my clients and stuff, they were bedbound for a time, right? They literally couldn't get out of bed. The universe forced them to be selfish and really focus on yourself. And I think realizing that at some point you are at that line, and I was at that line, and I crossed it, right? This is the main reason I had Meniere's disease. I just wouldn't stop. I kept pushing and pushing, and it wasn't till I had those really severe Meniere's attacks that forced me to stop, that I paused and said, oh, yeah, there is still a few things hiding there that I really need to address and look at and dissolve. And the beautiful thing is once they are dissolved, they don't have that power over you anymore. It's just there. It's just that. And it doesn't impact on your quality of life, on your engagements, on your friendships, on your career or hobbies or anything. It's there. No amount of happiness that you have right now, no amount of joy or love is ever going to take away the fact that what happened to you in childhood was wrong. Never. It was that. Right? But sometimes we're hanging on to that because that's us feeling really lonely and sad and having all these issues is kind of the only evidence that something bad happened. Do you understand that? Right. To really realize, no, it's nothing. No amount of happiness you're having now is going to take that away, right? It's not. Sometimes people feels like this is giving the message to the abusers that it wasn't that bad. I'm not even. No. The more. It's usually us who still spend a lot of time thinking about the people who hurt us. And I really want you to sit with the question and think about how much time do the people who abused you think about you? That was a real wake-up thing for me, right? Because probably most of them wouldn't even remember me, right? That was nothing to them. They moved probably on with their lives. And here I am thinking and ruminating about them, over-analyzing all this what happened and how I should have been different. And if I did this or that, would it not have happened? And, going into those kind of stories. And again, when I'm in there, I'm so caught up in my head. I'm so separate from anything out there. And I'm also separate from myself, from my true self, from my true nature, right? So Carolyn, I couldn't even leave my home for years unless I was pushed to do so from very important reasons. Yes. Yeah. Right. And this, these are the signs, right, to really recognize, oh, wow, this is how deeply my past affected me. This is how much all this hurt me. And bringing some gentleness there, right? Because sometimes we have a tendency to beat up on ourselves. My gosh, why did it take me so long? And look at her. She's just done this one therapy or healing week and she's got it all together and moved on, right? And here I am still struggling, right? We can do this kind of comparison thing with other people on that journey, but you just recognize, oh no, this deeply affected me. And this may have just been what your body needed, that distance from people, to really have some sense of I learning to how to regulate your nervous system, right? So sometimes that can be a good thing in a way, rather than the opposite, where people override that and force themselves out. So I was more in that spectrum, right? I had periods where I couldn't leave home, but they were shorter. For most of the time, I did the opposite. I was overriding all my impulses, all my instinct of knowing that when my body said no, I just overrid it. I just pushed through. I have tremendous willpower. And sometimes people are jealous of that, right? Because they can't get themselves to do anything and they're procrastinating. And it's like, no, I give you can you give me some of yours and I give you some of mine, and then we're balanced in the middle? Because neither is healthy, neither is helping us feeling good, right? Whether you're not getting anything done or you're just overriding and you're just pushing. Because when you're pushing and forcing, there's no joy in the process. You're not doing it for the right reason, right? It comes back to the similar principle as with the people pleasing. It's just doing it in the hope to fit in the hope to be accepted or appreciated or have a sense of belonging in this area, whatever it is, right? To recognize that, oh, this is the underlying story. I no longer want to entertain that story. How else? What else could I think about that myself in that situation, creating a different story, different perspectives? Exactly. I still tend to isolate and have to work with not doing that. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And why does isolation have to be wrong? Have you ever wondered that? Right? Because sometimes we do things and we're telling ourselves this is wrong, but why does it have to be wrong? I spend a lot of time by myself, the majority of the time actually, and I really enjoy it. I am perhaps an introvert, or when people talk introvert, extrovert, I really enjoy just going for walks by myself, being home. I like it. Again, why? I'm slowly peeking out of my hermit. It's scary. Yes. Yes. And to really explore that, right? What exactly is scary? When we're in this hermit kind of mode or isolating, what are you trying to protect yourself from? So it's a protective mechanism, right? It's a tool from our toolbox, right? It's still a tool that we're using. It served us really well, helped us to survive, but now we're still using it, and it doesn't feel quite that aligned anymore. So what is it protecting you from? Explore that. I think sometimes it is tries to protect you from humiliating yourself, disappointment, being hurt, right? So our mind is already trying to protect something in the future that hasn't happened yet. the check-in on this. Thank you so much for being open and giving the others survivors. You're welcome. I like to put, I like it, but don't want to be scared of community and that everybody would hate me. I do like my lone wolf life. Right. So here's the story again, that everyone would hate me. And to really explore, what would my life look like if that story didn't exist, if this wasn't one of my beliefs, if I didn't believe that this was true, what would my life would be like? What would I be doing different? And sometimes flipping it on ourselves, right? In reverse, because sometimes we may have, I don't, in that, what do you say, would hate me. Sometimes when we're going out, there can be resentment, being very honest here. But when you're going out and you're seeing some people, some families, some couples, and it feels like there's so much love, there's so much bonding, there's so much togetherness, that they're having something that I don't have, right? There can be resentment towards that, jealousy, right? That and that missing out, and seeing that stark contrast. Oh, this is what I want, but I can't have it, right? Kind of. So it reinforces that gap of that loneliness. It feels even heavier when we see that. And to be really mindful, because most of the time it's our interpretation of that situation, right? Like everyone has dark moments, to keep that in mind, but to really realize, is me comparing myself to them, or those kids' upbringing, or that family, is it really helping me right in this moment to feel better about myself, to feel more connected, or not, right? And for me, for a while, it was almost a little bit spooky or freaky. But sometimes when I was at places, and especially mums with very young children, and they have a lot of love for that little toddler and stuff. And I was sitting there and I was staring at them, not realizing I was staring, but I was so completely absorbed by that experience, that how much love there was, and that because I had such a big longing for that love, that unconditional love, that almost I imagined being this toddler experiencing all this love, staring, being frozen in that moment, right? Freaking out some of the moms. I remember once the mom packed up and left, but I was so dissociated in that moment that I didn't realize that I was actually staring at them. I made her really feel uncomfortable, but for me, this is quite many years ago. But to recognize that deep longing that we have for this unconditional love, and can we use that situation and allow ourselves to feel, what would that have felt like in my body, receiving that unconditional love, right? And sometimes we can do it in a situation. Maybe it's a movie. It's better than in real world. Or if you have a very good friend that when you're telling and can talk to that friend, that you're really trying to get that experience, and you realize that she or he, they have so much love for the little toddler, and you know that you're trying to feel what that would be like being a toddler like this. And maybe some people can be open and let you observe them and how their family runs, right? For you to have that experience, what would that be like? Because so often when we're here in therapy, or you got to be more loving towards self, more compassionate, most of us, we have no concept of that. Or what is that like? What am I meant to do, right? How do I do that? What would be more caring for myself, right? This is something that we have to explore and become playful about and experiment with. Would that help me feel more supported? Sometimes it can be very simple things, like I like having a really cozy soft blanket and wrapping that around me, right? That allowing the blanket to give me some warmth, or leaning back into the wall, allowing myself to be wrapped in a blanket and being supported by the wall, right? So initially there was no people involved in that, right? It's just getting a sense of being supported. Or I recently did a video on how I regulate in the car before I go out. The car is beautiful. The car seat is, because it's like most of your body, right? It's up in your head, to allow yourself to feel really supported and sink into that chair. Maybe you have a comfy sofa chair or something where you can just really sink into and say, oh, wow, what is this like? Because if there's no other person involved, it has a different kind of quality, but it could be a good start sometimes. I lost track of that. I'll explore unicorn. Doing something daring. No, I would be okay either way. Been at same job for 20 years. Yes. Something daring. Sometimes we can do that too much, and sometimes we can do that too little, right? Again, it's so hard to find the balance, because so many trauma survivors are really into all these really extreme sports, right? That real high adrenaline peaks, because obviously, right, that recreating those real dangerous situations for themselves. And the flip side is, like, when we're so not stepping out of our comfort zone, right, to protect ourselves from feeling uncomfortable. It's almost like we have to increase that tolerance level for feeling uncomfortable, to teach our nervous system it is safe for me to feel uncomfortable right now, to remind myself I'm in an adult body right here now. There's a little bit of uncomfortableness, but I'm safe, and reorient yourself in the room, right here, right now. I'm by myself in here, and here's the kitchen, right? Here's the sounds coming back. It is safe. It's a safe feeling. And it's the amygdala tries to trigger that and bring up some anxiety and stuff. So you almost have to rewire. Yeah, you have to rewire that, but consciously even speak out. I used to have a little flashcard where I had it written on it that this is a false alarm, right? It's just a sense of uncomfortableness. It's safe for me to feel, and breathe into that and getting really curious. Oh, where in my body is that sense of uncomfortableness, right? Most of our senses are usually kind of in the lower abdomen, stomach, chest, throat, sometimes in the head, right? Somewhere in that region, we have that sensation. What is that sensation like? Does it move around? Is it sharp? Is it heavy? Is it dull, right? Does it go stronger, lighter? And all these kinds of things, getting really curious about it. Like you're a researcher. It's the first time you've ever experienced uncomfortableness in the body, and you're getting really curious. What is that phenomenon? to realize it's just a sensation, right? It's just a sensation. But it's the stories that I'm telling myself that I shouldn't be feeling this way. This isn't okay. And going on to this thought train again. Okay, I'll explore it. I think my narcissist just tore me apart, so I'm brainwashed to think that this is helpful. Yeah, and to realize that this is exactly what all the trauma and abuse did. You know, for some people, the patterns were right from the beginning of our lives. Some people had narcissistic relationships more in adult life that really felt like brainwashed. I'm a different person from before I went into that marriage to now, right? They have a before and after. For a lot of people, there's no before and after. It always felt like I'm really deeply influenced the way I think about myself by these kind of people, right? And to recognize you had no other choice when you were little, right? To keep reminding yourself. When I was 4 years old, right, my prefrontal cortex was not developed yet. I could not make sense of that situation. It was physiological impossible, right? As a child, you do your best in making sense of the situation. It always goes inward. It always makes you feel like I did something wrong, or there must be something wrong about me. I'm so different to everyone else. This is why this is happening for me. This is how all this starts, right? And to recognize this now as an adult, it's like, oh, of course it is like that. Of course. It couldn't have been any other way, right? But also reminding yourself that with what we know about neuroplasticity now is that we can change all of this, right? We have the ability to create new versions of ourselves, new experience. We can rewire it. I would have never imagined that my life could ever be anything like what it is now. Never. When I think back, I was just riddled with anxiety and depression. That melancholy was just a constant. It was always there. And the nightmares, I would never sleep at night, and the flashbacks and the ruminating. And my mind used to really love catastrophizing about the future. And it was specialized. It was a master at that. and all of that is gone. Right? It's dissolved. Even the way I see my traumas now is very different. And I realized that my perception of the situation was my perception, because that's my age, who I was, right? Other people in my environment, they remember the same scenario, the same situations very differently. And that used to be very triggering for me. But to realize now, oh, okay, I can more put myself in their shoes. It's like, oh, they're looking through different glasses. And I can be okay with people seeing things differently, because I know that doesn't mean anything about me or who I am, whether I'm worthy or not worthy, right? Whether I'm lovable or not lovable. There's nothing to do with that. It's just a different perspective. Mine is just as valid as theirs is. Mine is just as right as theirs is. And mine is just as wrong as theirs is. That was the hardest part for me to learn, right? That I thought the way I saw that situation is the one and only right way. This is a fact. This is how it was. And that's created a lot of friction for me. That part was more in the final part of my healing, right? So I just want to point that out. So I don't know. Sometimes it's a bit hard when you're doing lives because there are some people who are more in the beginning where the PTSD is really flared up, thinking about how you see the abuse that happened might be very triggering, and it's not the right place to go right now, right? It's more learning on how to be grounded in your body again and help you regulate that nervous system so you don't have to have all your guards up. So getting back to loneliness, I'm totally off track. Right? So when I go into social settings with other people, that I don't have to be fully guarded and I can actually feel a sense of connection, right? Or when I'm home by myself, that I would give myself permission to call someone, right? So many of us are not able to hold space for someone to cry or to listen. And I'm guilty of that too, right? How often have people come to me and they had, I don't even know, whatever happened in their life, and they're telling me, and I instantly slid into giving advice. And we all know how much we hate advice in those moments, right? But it's so human. We see that person suffering and we love them, and we just want to get them out of the suffering, right? Well, giving advice isn't getting at them. I had to learn to not. It's okay if they're crying. It's okay. Tears are welcome. If anxiety is here, anxiety is welcome. To just sit with a friend and just listen, right? Perhaps for us here, because we have been in therapy and we have been reading so much, we know more about that, how to be there for others than someone who has never been in therapy, right? This isn't, most of us growing up didn't have role models in showing on how to just be a good listener and just being there for other people without giving advice, right? Yeah. There's place for advice, right? Sometimes people will actually ask for advice, and or even the other way. If you're really tempted to give advice, ask for, is it okay to give advice, right? To ask that, to check that. Yes, to something. I miss having someone to hold me. Yes. A physical touch. And when we're recognizing that, right, it's like for some people, this is really important, that physical touch. And we can even do that on giving that ourselves in a way, or in our inner child. But if there's no one there, right, there's also, we can book in for massages or I forgot the name, craniosacral therapy and things like that, or, and anything where people kind of do some healing touch in a safe space to have that experience, right? Just because there is not a friend around where you might feel comfortable, right? But I think a lot of people miss touch, but they're so disconnected from that they don't even notice. And sometimes when we're asking for hugs, you can even realize the awkwardness in giving that. People, it's really interesting. It's really interesting to explore that. And if it's physical touch, then it's beautiful to know that this is what I'm craving. And if it's not, how if you're not in a relationship or you don't have a friend nearby, how can I create that for myself? Where can I get some physical touch? Or weighted blanket sometimes can help in that situation too. Yes, we do. I miss having someone. I have 3 dogs and 2 cats, so that's good cuddles. Yes, they can be also great. Snuggling up in a blanket. Yeah, I feel stuck in those times. You give me hope. I recognize so much of what you say in myself. Beautiful. Beautiful. And I think that's the beautiful thing that we have these days, right? We have the online world. We have all this information available to us. We have these platforms that we can use, and we can realize that there's other people who've gone through similar stuff and they come out the other end, right? And that can really give us some sparks of hope, especially when we're in very dark times, right? To recognize this. Beautiful. I just realized I've been talking along for an hour. Thank you all for being here and participating in that, right? I feel like I'll do that more regularly or more spontaneous, maybe at different times too. I'm trying on Saturdays. I really enjoy it, and as long as you guys are feeling it helpful and it creates some sparks of hope or something, then it's all good. So beautiful. So grounding ourselves before we get off the call. Sometimes it can almost feel like you're coming together here and it almost puts you into a different reality. And then you're closing the call and then you're back home by yourself alone again, right? But you just really ground yourself and remind yourself when that sense comes back right after this call, right? It's like, yes, seeing yourself still on the train, says, oh, here's the train again. He wants to get you on the, I'm feeling lonely. But to remind yourself, yeah, they're the thoughts. What else is going on in my body? What can I feel? What are my sensations in my body? What can I see? All of this is there at the same time. Here is loneliness. Yes, loneliness doesn't go away, but there's also trees, there's birds, there is, I feel my feet touching the ground. I can feel my hands on the chest, right? And we can even give ourselves some massage our earlobes, because actually all the vagus nerves that come down the face. See, now I keep talking, but anyway, that's the last thing I wanted to share, because I didn't want, it just came up right now. I just realized all the vagus nerves, they run towards the front and the chest here. So sometimes when we feel really dysregulated, just massaging our earlobes can actually be really soothing. And it's really interesting, because when I was a little kid, that was something that I naturally always do. And if you watch kids, they sometimes naturally play with their ears. There's something very regulating and soothing. So some of those things we intuitively know. Trust that, right? If there's something that is helpful, then go with that. Allow yourself to do that. And give yourself that. Okay, that was it. So thank you guys for being here, and I guess we connect again soon. Bye.